Yeah, B. Yeah, B. Yeah, B. Yeah, B.
Are you ready? Are you set? Let's go. All right. So today I want to do something very interesting. I don't think that I have researched a draft nearly as much as I have this one, especially among the top 35 to 40 prospects. The Toronto Raptors do not have a second round pick. So, to those of you who are expecting a full big board that goes 60 deep, I'm sorry. This one's only going to go 20 deep. But this is how I rank these prospects long term. You're going to see a prospect rating. You're going to see offense, defense, potential, intangibles. All sorts of these things have a grade next to them. It took some time to do this. I think that we can get pretty sucked up into mock drafts. I think there are some people who are better at this than others, but most people tend to parrot each other, and it becomes a little absurd, when you see Cam Whitmore, Jarris Walker, 5'6", 5'7", 5'7", 5'7", for someone to come out and say one of these guys is going to be the 20th best player in the draft. I think people start to blast that, and they get, because how can the herd be wrong? The herd is always wrong. That always happens. Conventional wisdom teaches us that there will be 3 to 4 all-stars or guys who are like all-stars in an average draft. In a really good draft, maybe those guys, it gets out to 5 or 6, right? And they're scattered all over. But conventional wisdom definitely tells us that it's not usually the 1, 2, 3. It doesn't usually work that way. Usually someone screws up. And so it's scattered throughout the lottery. There's usually a guy in the late teens, early 20s that pops. There's usually a guy from the second round that pops. But what if someone in 2014 had Nikola Jokic as their first or second prospect? I think people would have written that off. I think for a couple of years, that person would have been insane. But today, I'm pretty sure that person could parlay that projection into a job offer with an NBA front office. So I think that there is a lot to be gained by thinking for yourself in this situation. And I wanted to do that today. So not only over the last 5 to 6 months, as I've been expecting the team that I follow and cover, the Toronto Raptors, to tank, and then they didn't tank. And then, so you're looking at the top 5, 6 guys, and then you start looking at a deeper range, and then you start talking about later in the first round, maybe there's early risers, guys who fall, so you've pretty much scouted the first 35 picks, so you've watched full games. And to anyone who wants to do this next year, and I know that there are some of you out there, Goateology, there are people, in this community who have created channels of their own. And to those of you who want to do this next year, Some unsolicited advice: watch full games. Don't just watch the highlights. Highlights are a teaser. They can really be misleading. Watch full games, hone in on prospects, look at their body language. I think it tells you a lot. Don't just look at the numbers. Analytics are so hard. With these prospects, analytics are so hard. How do you gauge how Victor Wembanyama's numbers in a French pro league, a very competitive league, gauge against Emin Thompson in the overtime elite? How do you do that? And how do you penalize someone for playing against lower competition or drastically elevate them for playing against higher competition? How do you account for the small sample size that is usually college basketball, right? How do you gauge what a guy is in a 30-game season and then project that out to what he's going to be in an 82-game season? How do you change? How do you factor in for the money factor? How do you factor in for the role shift? How do you account for the fact that the guy was simply in the wrong role? What about a small sample size being a drastic indicator of potentially there was injuries? A guy like Tariq Whitehead. Do you look at the high school stuff? Do you look at the football stuff? Do you look at, everything he did in his prep career, or do you simply base it on what he did at Duke? How much do injuries factor in? How much does conditioning factor in? There are certain players who played most of the season in their college year. They were overweight, but then they come into the draft and they're super in shape. How much of that is them slimming down for a new role in the NBA? How much of that is them just trying to be on their best behavior to get paid? There's so much that goes into this. After spending 6 months watching games, what I wanted to do was listen to the prospects. Long form, 20-minute, 30-minute interviews, listening to these prospects answer various questions. There's a lot of scripts. Guys are going to tell you what you want to hear, right? And you have to be careful with that. You have to be super careful with that. And I think my background in philosophy, psychology, has given me a unique window, a personal curiosity in true crime, and just living life, a personal fascination with success, listening to successful people describe what made them successful, watching successful people my whole life, watching the NBA for 25 years. There's a lot that goes into this. That all being said, there is a very, 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 very strong chance that 50% of what I say today is going to be absolutely wrong by year one. I'm open to it. I had an argument with my girlfriend the other day where we were talking about making mistakes. And I said, why do you think mistakes are a bad thing? Mistakes are a great thing. And I'm willing to make a lot of mistakes here. So without further ado, I bring you my top 20 NBA big board. Starting at number 1, Victor Wembanyama. Surprise! I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go off the board and pick somebody else over Wemby. There's so many things that fascinate me about Victor Wembanyama, from his defensive potential to his athletic fluidity, to his preparedness, to his level of maturity, to his skills package, his advanced skill package, to just generally how much he loves basketball. His whole family loves basketball. This is not something that he fell into because, like a lot of guys, he was 7'4" and thought, what the fuck else am I going to do? He actually cares about this. He loves the game and he's a winner. More importantly, perhaps, is all the intangible stuff that he brings from leadership, maturity. He has a ton of presence about him. There's also the marketability factor. We're not talking about marketability as much here, but there's so much to like about him. His entire mental, athletic profile, physical profile screams all NBA. Will he be an MVP? No idea. Will he be able to stay healthy? I don't know. I expect that he will have a good chance of remaining healthy in the NBA. He's done a lot of work, strength, conditioning, all that stuff to make sure that he's given himself a really good chance to be healthy in the NBA. But I don't see how this guy fails in the NBA. I think he's a great prospect, about as great a prospect as we've ever seen. Am I willing to put him over LeBron if they were in the same draft? I don't think so. I think he would go second behind LeBron for me, but it's close. It's close between those two, and that's saying so much because, man, so high on LeBron. I saw LeBron when I was 15 years old, and when he was, I think, 17 years old in person, it was absolutely insane to watch that guy beast on people who were like 2 years older than him at the time and just looked like an NBA professional at 17. Well, Victor Wembanyama has been looking like he could probably play pro for the last year and a half, and he's played against some strong competition. He dominated the professional league that he was playing in. Um, there are some things that you do wonder about with him in terms of his game, like how it will translate to the NBA. But I think with the expanded court, a player like him is just going to get even better. I would not be surprised if he comes out and averages 20 points and makes an all defense team in his first year. I would also not be surprised if the Spurs decide to take it slow. I think in terms of organizational fit, coaching, etc., his camp knows San Antonio camp really well. He has deep relationships with Tony Parker through French basketball. And unlike with Yao Ming, there is a strong emphasis of patience from not only the French national team, but also his camp. I think most importantly, he's surrounded by really great people. He just has really great people in his life. He gravitates towards great people. He has a strong maturity about him. And I think that'll keep him from losing his mind, the culture shock, all of these things that you worry about with a foreign prospect. I think he's built for this. Moving on to number 2, Scoot Henderson from the G League Ignite. Victor Wembanyama once said that if he were not born, Scoot Henderson would be the number 1 player in this draft. And I believe him. I think there's so much that Scoot does well based on how the game is played today. I think his offensive upside is immeasurable. I think this guy could average 30 points per game someday. I see shades of Baron Davis, Derrick Rose, John Morant, but there is a dog in him, like a real dog. He wants to kill people on the basketball court. He wants to destroy you. He wants to humiliate you. He wants to annihilate you on the basketball court. And I don't think you bet against a player like that with his physical profile. He's a very smart player. He is a generational athlete. We use the term generational far too often, but in the case of Scoot, I have never seen a player quite with his physical profile. Built like a linebacker, honestly strong as an ox. When he was 17 years old, he went up against pro prospects and he did not look out of place. I think that's a really good omen. Maybe not quite the progress you wanted last year. Maybe some questions about jump shot. Some people call him a non-shooter. I call him an evolving shooter. I think he can expand it out to 3. Some people see Russell Westbrook. I think if Russell Westbrook was really mature and had a really team first mentality and was a really great, Russell is a great passer. I think he has the potential to be a perfected version of Russell Westbrook might have been had Russell Westbrook not had so many immaturity issues, because Scoot Henderson is a team player. He's a player who'll play off the ball, on the ball. To the Charlotte Hornets, who have all these concerns about his fit with Lonzo Ball, trade Lonzo. Easiest solution in the world. These are not comparable prospects. I think the number 2 pick is cursed. I don't know why people always overthink that pick, from Darko Milicic to Marvin Bagley to James Wiseman. How many players bust at number 2? I'm almost happy for Scoot that he's going number 3. I mentioned that to him yesterday. I would be really, really happy that he's going to go number 3, because hopefully he's going to end up in a better situation than Charlotte. So that is where I am on Scoot. Now, my number 3, I went back and forth 100 different times on this. And I probably will flip-flop again by the time the draft rolls around tomorrow night. But for now, I'm going to put Emin Thompson at number 3. Now, how do I feel about Emin? Well, look, athletically, this is next level shit, right? I've seen him go up against Mega Basket, and he was just incredible, right? Like his athleticism, shot blocking, disruption defensively, the things that he can do, how quickly he gets downhill. The finishing is a little bit wonky. I wonder if, the release point is a little bit low sometimes on the release. The shooting is a massive question mark, but the playmaking is not a question mark. And you get this guy with this athleticism and this level of burst and 5th gear athleticism, the intangibles. He has a great deal of maturity. Look, I know a lot of people clown on the Thompson twins for going and playing an overtime elite, because they say, well, who the fuck did they actually play? And that's a fair criticism. If you look at the rosters of the overtime elite, and I spent some good time looking at them, there aren't a lot of 5-star recruits there. There aren't a lot of NBA prospects. It's these 2. So a lot of people joke that the league was basically built for these two as an exhibition, and you can make that case. And I think that's a very similar case to the case that people made against Shaden Sharp last year. You know, he didn't play, we haven't seen it, et cetera, et cetera. Fine, I get it. But these are guys who love to hoop. They do love to hoop, you know, and you can look at the overtime elite thing as one of two things. Either you can say they ducked the competition, you know, you can say they ducked out, they didn't want to go to college. And you know, you can disagree with the decision in the wake of the NIL deals that they could have gotten. Fine, you can make that case, and I'll be with you on that. That makes sense. I don't necessarily agree, but you got to look at players who are willing to do something different and say, well, how does that project into their mental makeup? The willingness to do something new, something original. The overtime elite is not a joke. Obviously, there's a lot of NBA players affiliated with it, including Pau Gasol. You know, in the board of directors, they may have viewed it as a prep school type of situation, right? As opposed to a league. The OTE is all about money, you know, and if these guys wanted to get paid, if they got paid handsomely for, you know, they got some exposure on it, that's cool. I think, you know, long term, we will see if this overtime elite thing works out, and these two will be, you know, the poster childs for that league for a little while to come, because they're the best players to come out of that program. But, you know, yes, the competition is not anywhere close to the G League Ignite or what Bilal Coulibaly was facing or Victor Wembanyama was facing, and it's not anywhere near. Sorry about the construction, guys. I apologize. I hope you can't hear that. It's nowhere near, you know, Division I basketball, like on the highest level. It's not Big 12, right? So you do wonder how much of that is going to get exposed. It's really difficult. You know, basketball is a competitive sport. Like, how do you see it? But there's certain things that these guys do where you see it on the basketball court and you're like, you could put anyone in front of them. They weren't going to stop that. There's quick reads, the way he sees the game, the way he peels off of the screen, his sort of fluidity, hip mobility, you know, he has so much of what Cade Cunningham had. It's just a way better athlete. These are the same physical profile as Cade, but he's a better athlete. He's a worse shooter. He's a way better athlete. I think he's a better passer. So you get that at 3. I think there's a lot of upside here. I don't know how you swing against it. Number 4, shock number 1, Anthony Black. All right. So I've gone back and forth on Anthony Black. Started out as probably my 6th favorite prospect, moved him down to about 8 or 9 when his measurements came out. He had a slightly muted wingspan, or a lesser wingspan than I was expecting. But as I've thought about it more, I've watched more game footage on him, I just can't get around all of his intangibles, his potential, his physicality. And the best way to describe his game, honestly, is a slightly smaller Ben Simmons with none of the maturity issues, none of the red flags, just the opposite person of Ben Simmons. You know, I'm not trying to criticize Ben Simmons necessarily, but Ben Simmons was also a guy who had kind of like diminished wingspan relative to his height. But I think Anthony Black's a very underrated athlete. Like, the way he comes downhill, like, it's very hard to stop. He didn't have to do like a lot of the creation stuff. I think there wasn't a lot of shooting, and you know, they were just told to go downhill. Great off ball. I think he can play, you know, small forward. I think he can guard 1 through 3. And look, he's a real point guard. This isn't like, you know, Jalen Hood-Schifino, where you're kind of hoping and praying that it's going to work out, or Kobe Buffkin or Keontae George or whoever, you know, that you think, you know, let's pray that they can be. This guy is built like a point guard. He sees the game like a point guard. He plays the game like a point guard. He's a completely immeasurable athlete. Like, he could have gone pro in football. I think he probably could have gone pro in baseball. Like, this is just one of those guys that you do not bet against. He's super smart. His interview just blew me away. Just the way that he knows himself, the way that he treats people, the charisma. There's a lot of Scotty Barnes vibes here. So I'm going to put him at number 4. I don't feel good about putting him behind Emin Thompson. If I had to bet, I'll probably switch this by tomorrow, where I go even crazier and I have Anthony Black number 3 on my board, but I'm that high on him. Number 5 is going to be another really big shock, and it's Jordan Hawkins. Now, I promise I'm not just doing this for the clicks, and I promise I'm not just doing this for the shock value. I started out really high on Jordan, and again, I moved down on him because of the freaking wingspan. And the more I watched him play, the more I realized that what he did in college is freaking unstoppable. The way that he gets open, the way that he gets his shot off, the way that he sees the game, it's incredible. And I think that there is an element of shot creation and off the dribble stuff that he wasn't allowed to show at UConn because he was playing within a system that required him to play a certain way. His work ethic is off the freaking charts. His love for the game factor, if there was a love for the game, element, his is at 100. He gets it. He totally does. He's a great person. From everything I've heard from people who were around him in Chicago, warm, welcoming, big smile, just a player that I can't see how this person isn't an all-star. I just can't see it. I've tried, I've thought about it. I'm like, how do you put him lower than 5? Look, it's not that, when I think about him versus a Bilal Coulibaly, like, I'm like, okay, Bilal Coulibaly in the 99th percentile, if he hits everything, he develops a shot, he does this, he does that, he does this, he does that. Yeah, he'll be better than Bilal. He'll be better than Jordan Hawkins. Sure. If Dariq Whitehead maximizes on all of his stuff and stays healthy, he could be better than Jordan Hawkins. There's a lot of if. But I'm not trying to go for if everything works out right. I'm going for if things work out the way they probably will work out. And I see a lot of Klay Thompson in him. Earlier, my first video was a draft profile of Jordan Hawkins. I saw a bit of Ray Allen in him. There's hints of Reggie Miller, lots of movement shooters that you can think about throughout the history of the game. Rip Hamilton, right? These guys are so dynamic. They impact winning in so many ways. And the Raptors really didn't have a lot of great off-ball stuff. So not that this is a Raptor-specific video per se, but I think that if he falls to 13 for the Raptors, then he's sitting very, very pretty, grabbing Jordan Hawkins at 13. But I just don't think he's going to fall. I think some GM is going to see the value of this guy, and they're going to take him. And I know that consistently Grady Dick has been mocked higher than him, but I think Jordan has the defense. I think he can get into the ball a little bit. I think he can probably guard 1 through 2 reasonably well. I think he'll be an above average defender. I don't see this as a Jordan Poole situation. So will he be Klay Thompson? Probably not. No, he's a little bit smaller than Klay Thompson. Fine. But I think he'll be close. I think he could get really close to that. And that is excellent value to get at 5. Moving on to number 6, Brandon Miller. Just a player that, honestly, if I could, I'd probably put him even lower. But I don't want to. But I kind of want to. I don't know how to explain it. There's so many question marks with him, from, how his performances dipped against better competition, to how he finished around the rim, to the off-court stuff, which, I mean, granted, he didn't commit a crime, and I'm not going to hold it against him, and everyone's guilty. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But something that I've noticed consistently about his interviews is something just always strikes me as off. He's telling you what you want to hear. Who's your favorite player? Paul George. Oh, really? Like the guy that you've been compared to the whole time? Something just feels off. And I question how much he loves this game. I question how much he's willing to be a leader. He's talked often about how he hasn't really been a vocal leader. He's been more like a lead by example type leader. I don't see it. So look, very talented player. I also question the release. I question his ability to get open off the dribble. I question the defense. There's so many questions. Now, look, this is hot take territory, right? People consider him number 2. I've got him at 6. I honestly could have slid him down all the way to 9 or 10 if I was, just a little bit more confident in the tape that I watched in him. And I'm not confident in a lot in this draft, but I'm confident that whoever picks Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson is going to get fired within 3 years or live to regret it for the rest of their lives. I think this is a story you're going to be telling your grandkids. All right, moving on to number 7, Derek Lively. Now, I moved Derek all the way up to 5, and then I moved him all the way down to 10. I'm just going to settle at 7 for Derek Lively, largely because I can't decide how much the shooting is actually going to improve and how much the playmaking is real. But I think to those people who think that he's just never going to develop a jump shot, I think you could be wrong. His shot blocking was insane. His rim protection, his athleticism, I think he's a full court athlete. I think the shooting can come along. I think he can actually develop 3-point range. I think he can one day be a 32, 33, 34% three-point shooter, but all accounts he works really hard. I know centers tend to get a little bit devalued in the draft. It's kind of just where we are, but he's a really good athlete, and he's someone who can actually switch out on pick and roll. My biggest mistake last year was Walker Kessler. Biggest mistake by far. I just didn't see it with him, and I didn't want to make the same mistake with Derek Lively. I don't want to make the same mistake 2 years in a row. I think Derek Lively has a greater upside than Walker Kessler. And look, I honestly, this is the one prospect where I didn't do deep study on the interview stuff. So I don't know how he interviews, but he's been mocked as high as 10 and as low as 14. I'm confident that he'll end up a top 10 player in this draft. Number 8, Juris Walker. Also a guy that I could move up or down on based on how I think about his season at Houston. Not the greatest team right around him. Kind of question why he didn't use his physicality more than he did. There were so many times where, you could see him and he had this advantage over this guy, and you just be like, dunk on that dude, dunk on him. And it left a lot to be desired when he would just put up a floater. The creation isn't great. The shot creation isn't great. What intrigues me about him is his almost 3-and-D versatility projection as a guy who could probably switch 3 to 5 comfortably. He has good mobility, really elite defender, just incredible, twitchy, strong, like so strong. Like I really could see this guy being a 5, 4, 3. Like he could be a beast defensively. This is the profile of a defensive player of the year for me. Now, if it hits, great. I liked his interview. Everything hits there. I could easily see him. Yeah, I could have moved him over Brandon Miller easy and slept fine. So let's consider 6 to 10 a range, and I just moved guys down based on how sure I was versus how sure I wasn't. Number 9, Asar Thompson. A little bit of a jack of all trades, as he's been described by every single person who covers the draft. I think his athleticism is just a notch lower than Emin's, and I think his alpha-ness, like his alpha drive, scoring, competitiveness, etc., is a little bit lower as well. I think he'll settle into being a very versatile role player in the NBA. Maybe a little bit more than that, maybe a little bit less. But I see him sticking around for a while. I don't see any Stanley Johnson type red flags where this guy's going to be, or I don't know. Like, I don't see a situation where this guy's going to be out of the league in 6 years or whatever, which is a lot, people say that the Thompson twins have a huge boom or bust potential. And I get that based on the competition that he faced, and everything that I said about Emin is true about Asar as well. Like, who has he really faced? But I think I'll trust the prep work, and I'll trust, the exhibition games as well against pro teams, and just say that, these guys are just live wire athletes, and whether you're right or wrong about them, there just aren't too many players in the draft on a yearly basis. If he goes back, if he pulls out of this draft, like, he's very much in consideration for the number 1 pick next year. You know what I mean? So you're getting value like that at 9. I don't know. I think the shooting is, people say that his shot has improved, and I think because he's compared to his brother so often that people almost view these guys like, this is the good shooter, this is the bad shooter. I'll be clear, neither one of these guys are good shooters. There's some serious issues with his shot, from his hand placement to the way that his legs are on his shot. It does not give me a lot of confidence. Whoever is going to draft this guy is going to have to work with him majorly on his shot. To put this into perspective, I think his shot is worse than Scotty's coming out of Florida State. But I also think he's got really good playmaking, really elite defensive upside. And look, as much as I've been like super duper high on Bilal Coulibaly, I think he has a lot of the same tools that Bilal does defensively. Speak of the devil. Here is Bilal Coulibaly. And hang on. I'm missing a player, and I apologize. Hang on, guys. I believe I'm missing a player. Am I missing a player? I am. Hang on. Let me just add that player in, because after Bilal, I jumped from 10 to 12. I thought I had fixed that, but apparently I did not. Okay, so let me just add number 11 back. So the upside with Bilal is obviously very tantalizing. He is an elite wing prospect who just came on big time. He played against pro competition. His work at the youth level in France was very promising. He has more scoring upside than I think people probably give him credit for. He did play with the top scorer in his league in Victor Wembanyama, but also one of the top playmaking bigs. His off-ball cutting is incredible. He lives in the paint. He loves contact, by all accounts, very hard worker. Bit of a late bloomer, bit of a late riser. Was initially projected as a first round pick in 2024, moved up to first round pick 2023, and now he's getting lottery buzz. I think if you pick him, you have to be a little bit more patient than people may realize. I think the handle is the biggest issue. For a guy who was once 5'7", his handle is not inspiring. What is probably going to give people a lot of are his measurables and the way he moves around the court. There just aren't a lot of guys who can be this large and still navigate around screens the way he can. And I think he will be like elite in this sense. So I buy the defensive upside. The offense, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it ends up. He could be a career 8-point per game scorer. I wouldn't be surprised. He could also blossom into a 25-point per game scorer, and I would not be overly surprised. It could go one or two ways with him, depending on how and which team develops him. Again, a lot of these prospects, it's going to come down to where they get drafted, what situation they get drafted in. But if I'm putting someone this high on the board, there are no red flags in terms of their interviews, in terms of their personal profile, and in terms of their game that are going to stop them from being, an all-star. I think we often ascribe to this, what has been true will remain true. And I just don't think that this draft is normal. I'm seeing guys that I'm ranking 18th or 19th in this draft that I would have as firm lottery picks as early as last year or the year before. A prospect like Moses Moody, you know what I mean? Like he was probably like 8th or 9th on most people's boards in 2021. And I don't know where that guy would be in this year's draft, but I'm positive it would be outside the top 16. So I just think this is a deeper draft. It's going to be, it happens, right? It happens. Next year's super weak. This year's super strong. So there's a very good chance that a guy you see at 10, 11, whatever in this year's draft could be like a normal 6th pick. How do I compare a Bilal Coulibaly to an Onyeka Okongwu as prospects? Pretty comparably, actually. So don't ascribe too much value to the number and be like, oh, this guy's a 17th pick. He's probably not going to be anything. Like, no, the 17th pick could be like a lottery pick in this draft. So I see Bilal as, a very intriguing prospect. I just don't think the sample size is huge. And unlike a lot of these guys like Emin and Asar, where there's like years and years and years of tape against high-level competition, with Bilal, it's like every single week there's something new. And you just have to wonder, is this a late surge to get drafted? And he's just inherently doing this because you just never know. Like, there is a logical element here where you just have to say, if I haven't seen it long enough, I have a right to be a little bit dubious of it. And, you can say it's opportunity. They brought him along slowly. He was playing with the U21 team, and then he started playing with the pro team completely. You can say, he just came along slowly. He's a late bloomer. Or you can say, this is a person who turned it on to get draft buzz. He knew he was going to get drafted. I trust Victor Wembanyama when he says this is a top 5 player in this draft. I don't think Victor's lying when that he thinks that. I don't know how deeply Victor has scouted, Jarris Walker tape, but he seems to really believe in this guy. And, by all accounts, when Victor was doing all that crazy work, Bilal was doing it with him. There's just all these other things, movement, shooting, skill work that needs to come along so far. But yeah, if he maxes out, this is the guy with the 3rd highest upside in this draft. His potential rating of 93 for me is the 3rd highest in this draft, behind Scoot and Wemby. I just happen to think that his actual rating, like if you put him, like my thought process here is, if you put all of these guys in a league, like overtime elite, let's say I start 23 draft elite tomorrow, and all of these guys are picked to a team, and they're all going to lead a team right? And then you're going to put like 4-star and 3-star recruits around them, and you'll be like, okay, Victor Wembanyama, carry your team of 4-star and 3-star recruits, and Bilal Coulibaly, carry your team of 4-star and 3-star recruits. Well, you start doubling this guy on the handle, and I think he's going to cough it up a lot. You start, like really trying to contest his shot instead of leaving it open like they did. I think he's going to miss a lot. So as much as you want to criticize someone like a Keontae George for being largely inefficient at Baylor, I think if you put Bilal Coulibaly in a situation where he has to run an offense, like I think he would be in a fish out of water. That being said, I did see good connectivity, connector potential as a playmaker. I saw some really interesting reads off the peel and like certain just basic reads he's making. I think he's made a couple of advanced reads also, some nice transition plays and full court passes. He is probably after there's some really good cutters in this draft. He's one of them. Backdoor cutters and just really sort of instincts. I think a lot of it, I think I would really compare him to a player like Pascal Siakam, to be completely honest with you, like just in terms of like what I like about him coming out of the draft. You know what I mean? Fluidity, but a little bit raw. So could I see a team maybe start him next year in an Isaac Okoro type of role and say, okay, just stand in the corner, shoot threes, try to get 33% of them to go in. Everything else will come. Well, that's just going to come down to him, and with foreign prospects, there's always the potential of culture shock. You don't know how he's going to react being away from family, language, etc. But all accounts, seems like a great guy, seems like he surrounds himself with good people, seems like he comes from good people. So I wouldn't bet against him, but I've gone anywhere from 4 all the way to 22 with him in this entire process, and I've landed at 10. Moving on to one of my favorite prospects in this draft, Cason Wallace, someone who says that he hasn't really had a great deal of opportunity to show off his off the dribble stuff. I just don't think he's necessarily the type of athlete. I apologize for all the buzzing that's happening. I dropped my recorder yesterday and I think it broke. Cason Wallace. So I think the potential is a little bit lower than some of the other guys who went in the top 10, but I also think the floor is a little bit higher. I think at worst, you're going to get a really pesky defender off the bench who can, probably play 25 minutes a game for you. I think the shooting is real. I think the set shot is real. I wonder about the dribble creation stuff, though, like off the dribble, hezzy pull-ups. He's a little bit smaller. He has an incredible wingspan to make up for it, but that's not really going to help him as much as a playmaker. He's a competent passer. He's not a gifted passer. So there's a lot of like everything sinks to the middle with Cason Wallace, except for the defense. So if he's average at everything and great as a defender, what does he really project as? He's a smaller Marcus Smart. I think that's a lottery pick. Marcus Smart was a 6th overall pick. But for him to ascend to the level that other Kentucky guards have, like guys that he's compared to, I think he would have to be a burstier athlete. And I just don't see a lot of downhill stuff with him. Finishing is all right, but I wonder about that at the next level as well. Number 12, Kobe Buffkin. I don't know how I feel about this, honestly. I could go as this is about the highest I could possibly go on Kobe, which is I think 10 to 18, 19 was where I had him, and there's things that intrigue me and things that worry me with him, right? Things that intrigue me: his paint finishing, his ability to just be this really big playmaker. I think he really can be a point guard. I don't think he's a pure point guard. I don't think his instincts are necessarily there as a point guard, but I think he can grow into it. I think he's very serious. Like, he's very business minded about his approach. I think he's a really hard worker. And I just like his approach to the game, and I like his potential. I don't think he's nearly the athlete that he looks like on film. Like, sometimes some guys are really, really long and they take long strides and they're not going up against the best defender in the world. You can start to sort of trick yourself into thinking that athleticism is something that it's not, but you start putting like guys like OG Anunoby and Jason Tatum on you, and that athleticism goes away real fast. So there isn't the type of athleticism that's going to translate to where it's making him a really athletic guard in the NBA. He's going to be an average athlete at the NBA level. And I wonder, between him and Brandon Paczinski, did Kobe just have the better name? because they're very similar players. In not similar players, but like they're big guards. They're big guards who are kind of off guards who can play the one, and you just wonder if Paczinski is going to be the better player long term. But I like Kobe Buffkin, so that I put him at 12. Number 13, surprise number 3 of this, probably maybe surprise number 5 for y'all at this point, is Rashod Repair, a player that actually I talked about very, very early in this process when I said the 4 guards that the Raptors are going to look at. I think if I'm looking at this draft, where's the drop off? I know Raptor fans are going to be excited to hear this. I think the drop off is 13. I think this is a 12 deep draft, and I think the minute you start getting to 13, the potential of getting a star starts going down, like big time. Like I don't think I see any star potential in anyone else I'm listing here except for maybe one guy. So with Rashod Repair, what do I like? I like that he's shifty. I like that he's athletic. I like that he really prides himself on defense. I like that he has strong basketball bloodlines. I like that his family plays basketball. His sister plays basketball. Like there's a few guys who fit that sort of profile where just basketball is their life and they've just kind of grown up around the game, and you can tell that they really love it and they're passionate about it. I like the conviction with which he speaks about himself. I like some of the tape, the intangibles, the length, the athleticism. I see a real projectable future where he could be a starter for like 8 to 10 years in the NBA. There's really nothing stopping him from doing that. Certainly has the hands and the wingspan and everything to do it. Played up against pros. I think he's better than Ousmane Dieng or, and it's kind of funny to me because Dieng was, picked 12th last year, I think 12th to 13th. And Repair's being mocked all the way down to the second round. And he's just a better player. I think there's a really good case to be made that he's right now a better player than Bilal Coulibaly, but he doesn't quite have the same mixtape stuff, but I think his functional athleticism will serve him very well at the NBA level. Number 14, Cam Whitmore. I could go lower on him. I could also go a little bit higher on him, but this is where I settled, right at the tail of the lottery. I think the playmaking is worrisome. The handle is not great. He kind of bully balled his way. He's younger, just like Bilal Coulibaly. There has to be an asterisk put when a guy's 18 years old and you're comparing him against 20, 21, 22-year-olds across the board. Like Emin Thompson, I think is 18 months older than Cam. But I really, really don't see like how someone with such few intangible skills and he's so raw, like in so many ways, he's so raw. Like the shooting is great. The splits are great. Like he off the catch was great. The athleticism was great, broad shoulders, everything. But I've just seen this prospect fail. And, this was the justification for, Walker Kessler last year. It was like, oh, well, you can tell I have a little bit of Walker Kessler PTSD because I'm kind of pissed that I didn't see that coming last year. But, I just said, oh, I've seen this type of prospect before. It's never going to work. And then it works because there's one thing that's different, or two things that's different. His personality and his work ethic. And, maybe he's a little bit quicker than I thought. So if Cam Whitmore is going to be successful in the NBA, especially if he ends up, going as a high lottery pick, 5, 6, 7, I think he's definitely going to have to develop a handle. I think he's going to have to take better care of the ball. I think he's going to have to do some work to make other players better because he's not going to just be able to bully his way into the paint the way that he did at the college level. Moving on to number 15, Brandon Paczinski. I could really go as high as 11 or 12 on him. I've gone all over. Like I've gone all the way from 11 all the way down to 24 with Paczinski, just like everyone else. I've ended up on a little bit of the higher scale with him. I really just love the way that he approaches the game. I'm seeing bits and bits, and please don't think that this is like, I think he's going to become this guy, but I see bits of Manu Ginobili in his game. He's a hooper. That's the best compliment I could possibly give to a player is that he's a hooper. He's a hooper. He's self-aware as hell. He understands. He has a chip on his shoulder. I like his attitude. I see no chance in hell that he does not stick in the NBA. I see no chance in hell that he's anything less than a rotation player in the NBA. This is not going to be a guy that you are going to want to pass up on if all these other guys are off the board. And I know that some team is going to pass up on him because he's a little bit older, or he played at Santa Clara, or, he didn't measure as well as you wanted him to, or something like that. And I think he's more athletic than people think he is. I think he's bursty. I think he's shifty. I think he's got this like really complete game. And, if the shooting is real with him, like, holy shit, like he could be like a top 10 player in this draft. Easy. He's the only guy that I'm seeing in this range where I'm like, I don't see anything stopping him from being a top 7 player in this draft. That being said, he could also settle into being a rebounding hustle role player, like something between like a cross between Josh Hart and Matthew Dellavedova. In either case, if you're picking him after 12, you're getting exceptional value at that pick. Like there are very few guys where I'm like, this guy can't fail. This is one of those guys where it's like, this guy cannot fail in the NBA. I'm fairly confident that he's not going to fail in the NBA. Oh boy, spelling mistake. I think there's a spelling mistake. There's supposed to be an I in there. I'm pretty sure it's Jaime Hawkes, and he's from UCLA. He is a 4-year player, little bit of a late riser for some people, believe, just got invited to the draft lottery green room. I expect his name to go a little bit higher than some people are expecting. I think he's blown people away in workouts. I think he's really, really, really good. I think Christian Braun is a really good, big reason why he's blowing up draft boards, because I think a lot of the same stuff that was applied to one can be applied to the other. He's got all these like skills. I don't know how else to say it, but all of these skills that translate into great basketball. He sets picks. He can body his guy. He can box out. He can do all these cool things. It's not quite Matt Harpring, but he has this body that is, you look at him and he's not athletic and he doesn't leave the floor, but then he tests like with this 40-inch vert or something. I think he's more athletic than people think. I think this is the Luka, effect, where some people think because a guy runs a certain way or whatever that they can't be effective. I think he's just awkward. I think he's an awkward looking guy. I think he's an awkward looking player, but he is so goddamn effective. One of the most productive players in college basketball last year. And, I buy the shooting, I buy the upside, and I buy the impact on winning. I think this is a guy that you bring off the bench for the first couple of years and eventually becomes your sixth man. And he might become like a fourth starter for you. And I think that's exceptional value. If history has taught us anything, the 16th best player in any draft has never been an all-star. So, it would be very unrealistic for me to be like saying right here that there's an all-star here. Like there probably isn't an all-star anywhere after 9 or 8 or even 7. So now you're just looking at guys who have really high floors, because don't make a mistake. These rookie contracts are exceptional value. And you're getting a guy who's NBA ready right now. He step into a rotation right now, play for you right now. He actually has a lot of Scotty Barnes in his game too. So I like his game overall. I think he's going to be a really good pro. I see no reason why he wouldn't stick around in the league. And I think some of the defensive stuff is overblown. He's a really smart player. He learns how to give space, and he's a big guy. Like he's a big dude. And I think defensive issues are always somewhat muted for me with bigger players. Moving on to number 17, Jet Howard, another player that I've kind of just gone all over the place with. I don't know where I am on Jet Howard from day to day, but I like him. I think that he his handle has really been the most impressive thing for me throughout this entire process. Just seeing how quickly he can get his shot off. I think he can be sort of a gunner off the bench for someone for a long time. If you're asking me, compare him to someone like a Jonathan Kuminga, yeah, athletically, Jonathan Kuminga, defensively, Jonathan Kuminga, this. But the shot and the handle, like he can do something at an NBA level right now. He's a big dude who can get that shot off against just about anybody. It gets off smooth off his hand. He can get it off the catch. He can get it off the dribble. And again, like, he's got isolation powers at 6'8". Like that's not something you should just take for granted because he has some defensive issues. Again, just like I said with Jaime Hawkes, like, he's a bigger player. There's always ways to hide bigger players on defense. Yes, I do think the defensive issues are real. But he also has a really good circle around him, and it's never a bad thing when your dad is an NBA player. Like he's been around this for a long time. I'll tell you what swung me on him and what has resulted in him ending up in my top 17. I really think he lives for big moments. I think he lives for bigger stages. There's some guys that crumble in big moments. And Raptor fans know that I'm talking about Pascal Siakam right now. There's some guys who just rise to the occasion. Like as the situation becomes more complicated, they become more prepared. As the situation becomes bigger, they become bolder. There's just guys like that. They're just kind of wired that way. They have sort of internal confidence about them. I think Jett Howard is a guy who will be that way. I think he rises to the occasion. So I think if he's gone up against NBA players, he's going to bring his big boy pants. And so one of the most underrated parts of all of this, to be completely frank with you, is how are these guys going to meld into an NBA locker room? How are they going to interact with other players? Are they going to be ostracized? Are they going to be able to hang? Are they going to know what they're getting into? How much of an adjustment is there going to be? He strikes me as really, really prepared mentally for the NBA. So I like him. Oh, man, Taylor Hendricks, the toolsy forward being compared to Pascal Siakam. Good jump shot, really came along really far away. I see the tools athletically. I see a lot of debate between him and Jarris Walker. And, he was interesting. Like one of the interviews that I watched with him, he had these really interesting answers, which gave me this feeling of like, wow, like he didn't do what everyone else said. Like he didn't just go with the conventional answer. He listened to different type of music. He watches different types of films than other people. He just strikes me as a really different type of dude. And I didn't know how to deal with, the difference between the player that I see on the court and the player I see in the interviews is just completely different. Just the player you see on the court is like he's screaming at people and he's in people's faces and he's getting highlight dunks. And then the people you see in interviews completely nervous. He's nervous. He's rubbing his legs, which is soothing body language. He's touching his face a lot, and that's an indication of lack of confidence. And so, you're going and by all the body language stuff, and you're like, okay, like, is this a guy who just simply is too long, too big, too skilled to fail in college basketball? You know what I mean? And UCF's not exactly like, I don't know. I don't know where I fell on him, but he strikes me as Earl Clark type. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying he is Earl Clark. I'm not saying he's like Earl Clark. I'm not throwing shade at Earl Clark. I really liked Earl Clark as a prospect, but I just think that sometimes we get enamored with this idea of what 6'9" shooter means, and we start to fill in gaps, and we start to see a switchable guy who can switch 3 through 5, and we can start imagining what that's going to be like. But I think at some point the game is mental, and you have to wonder whether this guy has the mental toughness to play in the NBA. And look, I could be very wrong. I mean, Brandon Paczinski is one guy. This is the second guy where in this range you're like, okay, like I can be really, really wrong about this guy, and all the people who have him top 6, top 5 are right. But for now, I have him at 18. Number 19, Grady Dick. Don't like the defense, don't like the handle, don't like the shot creation. Like the shot, like the movement shooting. I don't understand why he's being mocked in the lottery. I don't necessarily get it, but I'll be, perfectly fine to if I'm wrong. But I read one comparison to Reggie Miller, and I'm just like, nah, I don't think so. I don't think he gets space the way Reggie can. I don't think he's the athlete Reggie was. And Reggie wasn't some great athlete, but like he was a good athlete. I wonder when NBA defenders close in on him. I saw him struggle when guys got really physical with him on defense. Like I wonder if this is a guy who is going to be mentally tough enough, physically tough enough. He has narrow shoulders. I don't know how much weight he's going to be able to put on those shoulders. Defense is always going to be an issue with him. Once again, just like with Jett Howard, you say like, okay, well, he's 6'7", 6'8", so he's a bigger guy, so you'll be able to hide him a little bit on defense. But I see role player here. I see a guy who'll have 8 to 10 year career, not probably as a starter. That's just, my opinion. Again, I could be wrong. I'm the anti-Bill Simmons here. Bill Simmons tends to be really, really, really high on white guys. I tend to be probably a little bit lower than most on some white guys. I don't know. It's just a trend with me. It's not all white guys. Like obviously, like last year, I was pretty high on Chet. I had him as a second or third rated prospect, and that's fine. But that I've noticed that the guys I traditionally miss out on are white guys from college. So maybe this is just another white guy from college that I accidentally, inadvertently am discriminating against, but I don't think so. And number 20, Dariq Whitehead. Man, so many things to say about Dariq, right? Montverde 2021, 2022 came in the year after Scotty. He was playing their varsity team. I think he was in grade 8. Like he's a football player. Like he started out in football. His toughness is incredible. He's gone through a slew of injuries. There was an injury before the year. There's an injury now. Questionable whether he'll be able to work out for teams. Teams are gonna have to like really be confident in his medicals. But man, this guy as an athlete is electric. Getting a lot of AJ Griffin vibes from him. I think he was fairly productive at Duke. For all of the oh my God, he had such a bad year. I don't think his year was analytically worse than a lot of guys who've been picked, who are being talked about ahead of him, like Nick Smith Jr. and Keontae George. Defensive upside is good, like really good. The physical profile is incredible. Is like the prototypical 3-and-D wing upside here. And I think I think maybe we overuse the word dog, and that's probably because I follow Kelsey Plum on Instagram, and maybe I just use the word dog too much, like the dog mentality. This guy got the dog, that guy got the dog, whatever. I think Dariq got the dog. I think, Scoot's got the dog. I think Cason's got the dog. Like I think those guys just get after it. They get on people. They're competitive. And, will that work in the NBA? I don't know. Will he stay healthy? I have no idea. But I think the shot is decent. It's a little low, but it's decent. He shot it at a really good clip. I think this could be a 3-and-D role player for somebody down the line, in the mold of a Tim Hardaway Jr., something like that. So I think he's a role player. I don't see star. I don't think he creates well for others. I don't think he has all the shifty handle and stuff to break his guy down, and stuff like that. But I mean, if you end up with a Tim Hardaway Jr. at pick 20, I think you're sitting pretty. Anyway. Now I will take 5 minutes to 10 minutes to respond to comments that y'all might have. And thank you so much. There's some super chats here. Thank you. K-Money is back with the super chats, man. I appreciate it. Sorry about that. I did not get, so let me just get some of these. What did you think about trading P for point guard? Or P for PG as in Paul George? I like it. You get better. I think Paul George is a better player than Pascal Siakam. So, yeah. It's interesting, right? Because that's sort of like the rumored trade that was on the table from the OKC Thunder after the Raptors won a championship and they declined it. But I think Paul George just does like all these really incredible things with the basketball. I think he's a really gifted playmaker. I think he's a really good closer. And, he's his height, his peak, him at his best is just a different level of player than Pascal Siakam. He is older. He is really well paid. But if you're talking synergistic fit with this roster, like he fits so much better with this roster, man. Like he solves so many problems. He's a better defender. He's, a way better shooter. He's a better creator. He's a better ball handler. I mean, he's just better across the board. The idea that Miller can be is more fascinating than what Scoot can be, not going to lie. I don't even think that that's true. I really don't. Like because he's 6'9". I mean, okay, ask yourself the question, is the idea of what Darko Milicic could be more fascinating than the idea of what Dwayne Wade could be? Sure. But at some point, Dwayne Wade is a fucking bullet, and you're not stopping bullets, right? I remember watching Dwayne Wade at Marquette, and I remember reading a mock draft at the time. And the last time that I really, 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 really deeply studied a draft, as deeply as I've studied this one, was 2003. And I was creating a website back then. I was still I think it was like in high school or just going into high school at the time. And I was just obsessed with, wanting to know And the Raptors had the third best shots. And I was like, Melo, Melo, Melo. You know, I'd watch Melo the whole year at Syracuse. And then we ended up dropping to fourth. And I just wanted to do some draft investigation. Is it going to be Kirk Heinrich? Is it going to be TJ Ford? Is it going to be Chris Bosh? Is it going to be, someone else? There were other people. There was Pavel Podkolzin for a little bit there, right? And so I just became really obsessed with that draft. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I watched Darko play at Hammer Farm. I didn't understand why people liked him so much. I just didn't get it. And he's from my country. I had seen him play. I just don't get it. And I'm not saying I would have taken him outside the top 5, but I would have a really difficult time taking him over Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade. I probably would have taken him over Dwayne Wade. If I'm being completely honest at that point, like I think my ratings were, I think had him third behind Melo. So I get it. The idea of a guy who's bigger, who can shoot, etc., can be so incredible. But I just think so much of this game is mental, and I don't see how Scoot is anything less than an all-star, man. I just like all NBA type, like he sees the game so well. How he's supposed to stop a guy like this? He's so physical. He's so bruising. So, yeah, some people have questions about the jump shot. I have questions. I have way more questions about Brandon Miller than I do about Scoot Henderson. Keep spinning king. Thank you. Appreciate it, man. Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree. Cam Whitmore is apparently dropping right now. Medical concerns. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Rob, what does conventional wisdom say about really bad drafts? I'm not sure I understand the question. Who the heck is Denver going after? We need to keep an eye out on them. I think they're going after. I think they would be really smart to go after Jaime Hawkes if he drops to that range, or Tariq Whitehead. I think they could really use one of those guys. Look, conventional wisdom says to me that my top 20 guys, one of these guys is going to be available at 30. It always happens this way. If they find Paczinski, I apologize to every Polish person. Please don't write me a hate mail. I apologize. Like, I am Eastern European as well, but I struggle with Polish names always. Yo, man, I'm doing a live here. Y'all banging up the furnace and shit upstairs. My bad. There's some people hammering upstairs. I apologize for that. It's just the worst time ever. I got my 3 picks ready. Bilal, Kobe, Cason in that order. All right. Yeah, I listened to a bit of it. I'm gonna actually cut it into a short right now. I think it was great. It was great the way he answered that question. Yes, Tim Duncan can help him tremendously. And the most important thing, he's actually going to did I say Lonzo? I meant LaMelo. Yes, I would trade LaMelo. How do you know that? Because your name is Facts. Look, I've entertained the possibility that both Emin and Asar could be massive busts, and we're all going to be like, told you, and everyone's going to be like, didn't you see it on the wall? It was so obvious. They didn't play against anybody. I get it, but how much can you really bust if you love the game and you can defend the way those guys can? I don't know. And you would have to be convinced that they actually didn't give a shit about basketball, or they had like real personal issues there. Sometimes you just have too much talent to be that bad. Like, I'm not saying either one of those guys is going to be like, I mean, I guess with Emin, it would be really hard to see him not being an all-star. But, and again, like if I do this tomorrow, I might actually put Emin down to 4 and put Anthony Black up, because I have no doubt he's going to be an all-star. Yeah, I agree. I want Kobe. Sure. but how much of that is his name? Hawkins at 5. I do like him though. Yo, man, I tell you, if Jordan Hawkins measures 6'5" with 6'8" wingspan, he's probably a top 4 pick. But suddenly 6'4" with a 6'6" wingspan, and suddenly like everyone's like, oh my God, you know. And look, I'm a big measurements guy, obviously, but I don't need to remind you what happened to Bruno Caboclo and Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba. Like at some point, like it's between the ears, you know, those 6 inches between the ears, they do matter. I'm so blown away consistently by Jordan's personality and his approach to the game and just how he handles himself and how he approaches his work. It's like the way he just gets it. Like, you know, I some prospects, they just get it. Like mentally, they get it. I cannot imagine Masai Ujiri met Jordan Hawkins and was not blown away by him. And he has a lot of Scotty characteristics about him. Yep, I agree. That's funny. I don't think he's going to be Alan Ray. Yeah, this is a very toolsy draft. This is a big playmaker draft. The same was said about Pirtle. If you want to walk, if Yak wants to walk because of a rebuild, I would feel very comfortable bringing in Lively. I think Lively has more top end potential than Jakob Pirtle ever did. Sure. Sorry, but Scoot overrated as hell. Wemby is also overrated because his body just won't hold up. Remember Chet's small, similar build. LeBron just jogged to him. Boom, he's out a year. Fingers crossed that every moron on the internet saying that Victor Wembanyama is injury prone, even though we have never, touch wood, seen him be injured for long stretches of time. Granted, he just played a full season without missing a single game. He's been preparing for this. You don't understand, like, European prospects and injuries. Have you noticed that that tends to not be too much of an issue with European prospects? Have you kind of noticed that to be a thing, a trend? You know, Manu Ginobili was fairly durable throughout his career. Tony Parker is fairly durable throughout his career. Rudy Gobert has been fully durable throughout his career. Zion is not durable. You ever notice that? Have you noticed that? Have you picked up on it? Because there is a thing, you know, in Europe where a lot of the training staff there believe in preventative action as opposed to reactive action. We don't put a band-aid on things. We put sunblock on things. So the end of the day, you know, his team has done so much work. And granted, it may just not work. You know, it just may not work. But there's nothing about being 7'5" that makes you inherently, obviously, necessarily injury prone. This is a take that has been repeated over and over and over and over. And I just want people to shut up and have an original thought. Okay. You don't know he's going to be injury prone. You don't know that. Okay. Did you know that Zion was going to be injury prone because he walked like someone who was breaking down every second, like the gait? You know, I'm not a sports scientist. I'm not a physiotherapist. I'm not a doctor. I can't speak to this intelligently, but I can tell you I've researched this enough to be able to tell you that the way that you walk, the way that you move, the pressure that you put on your joints, the way that you land, your habits, your movement patterns, your fluidity when you move, all have a drastic impact on how injury prone you're going to be. Okay. It just comes down to that: age, fluidity, gait, history, previous injury history. All of these things make a player either more durable or less durable, you know. And if you can spot the trends early enough, you can say, okay, well, you know, 7'5" athlete moves in this pattern. We have to strengthen this. We have to make this more flexible, that more flexible. If you have a team that is literally spending millions of dollars a year to preserve your body, because that's what you mean to French basketball, then I think that he has a very good chance. Again, touch wood, I'm not clairvoyant, I'm not God, but I think Victor Wembanyama can be a lot healthier than people are giving him credit for. And I think he's going to work really, really hard. He has great habits, you know, great habits. Just a great person, just a really great person, and someone I'm going to be very much rooting for throughout this entire process to succeed. I think San Antonio trades back and snags him, Wemby and Bilal together in the NBA. That'd be interesting. The dream of Scoot to Toronto seems dead. Yeah, why wouldn't they? Like if you're good, if you believe in yourself, why wouldn't you want to have the ball in your hands? You don't think Scotty's camp wants him to be in a situation where the ball is in his hands? Boston pursuing Porzingis in a trade. Well, I mean, my God, the next 2 days, like the next I think 26 to 27 hours, I don't think I'm going to sleep one bit. And I wanted to work on this Serbia video like so hard. I wanted to make this live and whatever, but like it's just like your refresh phone. What's going to break? What's going to break? I'm assuming no. Oh man, what's going on? Down bad? You're overcompensating for Kessler picking Lively so high. You might be right. Absolutely. You might be right. As I mentioned, I do have Walker Kessler PTSD. What do you think if Dame opts? Because I mean, like, look, like Walker Kessler has everything that I really admire in players. He had the wingspan, he had the basketball IQ, he had an incredible box plus minus. Then he had like a 12 box plus minus. He had steady show of progression of growth throughout the year. I just couldn't get over the fact that he was a 7'1" white guy who didn't move the way I liked him to. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sometimes he just, I don't know. I hate to say it. Like, I would have picked Christian Koloko, Peyton Watson, Nikola Jovic, Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams. There's like set. I might even pick David Roddy over him. There's like a lot of guys. I think Walker Kessler would have been like my 32nd or 37th. But I was very happy that I had a very, very good take on Andrew Nembhard last year, though. I said he was like going to be at minimum like a really good role player. I was like very high on that pick. So I'm happy. Some things worked out, some things didn't. I was super high on Dyson Daniels. I think analytics show that he's good. I was good on, I was good with Shaden Sharp. I said Keegan Murray was going to be way better. Like I didn't do the whole Keegan Murray over Jaden Ivey D minus, so it's weird how we remember things. It was very interesting to go through that video. I was just like, because I just remembered, I wasn't super high on Brandon Mathurin and he turned out to be really good. And I wasn't super high on Walker Kessler and he turned out to be really good. I wasn't super high on Jalen Williams, J Dub, not J Will. But I wasn't low on J Dub either. I just said that I think he went a little high. At 12, I think I would have picked him closer to 17 or 18. And I thought there were like 3-4 players that were better. Namely, I think I was just overly high last year on Adrian Griffin. I really liked AJ. Really liked Adrian Griffin. So, I mean, jury's still out. We won't know for sure for 3-4 years. I mean, everything people saying about Walker Kessler right now, even people saying about Chet Holmgren because he hasn't played yet. And it's like if Chet comes back next year and he's kind of mid and he gets injured again, like now we're talking like, oh, why did he go top 6? Why did he go top 10? You know what I mean? Jabari is the other one where I was like, oof, I was pretty high on him, man. I also said that there's virtually no chance he becomes a star, but I expected him to be a better shooter than he was. I just think it's really hard to gauge prospects in Houston right now. It's just such a stupid team last year. So I'm hoping to see an improved Jabari Smith this year. I think that my last year rankings are going to look a lot better this year than they did last year. Okay. So who would we all want if Bilal, Cason, and Kobe are all gone at 13? Well, if they're all gone, like, is someone like Jordan Hawkins still on the board? Because if he is, then obvious answer. How the F will we get Dame? I don't know why you'd want Dame. It's a great player, just I don't think you have the fit around him right now. But I mean, Dame, OG, and Scotty, like I would pay to see that. Like every night I would be there. Probably I wouldn't be able to afford season tickets and have to rely on you guys to give me super chats so I could afford my ass to the game. But You just said the same thing. Nice. Yeah, it would be fun. Be fun as hell. I just don't know if Dame Scott. Oh, you're back. Zion is a distressed asset. Maybe Pascal to New Orleans and Zion to Portland. Multi-team trade. I like how you're thinking, but as I said in my last live, I don't think teams are just lining up for. I don't think people are lining up for Pascal Siakam if they can't get the extension agreed on. No, I don't. Scoot wants pals. Again, there's so many things. People send me like 17 or 18, different Twitter posts every hour. Everyone's got an opinion right now. I got my opinion. I don't know who that third pick is going to get moved for or to. But if Portland is intending on running it out next year with a core of Anthony Simon, Scoot Henderson, Dame Lillard, and Shaden Sharp, I think they're in trouble. They're in big trouble. So I'd like to see them move off that pick. Maybe move down, get some assets, get some role players. I don't think you need to swing for, we need a star next to Dame. Like, if you can get the right star, great, but you don't have to put a star around him. Just put some great players who do all that small stuff around him. Too bad you keep losing a lot of those players too. Anyway, Rob, would you do 3 and 13 to Charlotte for 2 to secure Scoot, or would you rather Miller and Wallace Buffkin? Damn, that's a good question. Would I move off the 13th pick to get up one spot? Maybe. I do think there is a very, 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 very big drop after the second pick. And I know people are starting to see this as a 3-player draft. Every time there's a 3-player draft, it's never a 3-player draft. Hakeem, Bowie, Jordan. That's not a 3-player draft. It was a 2-player draft. I mean, it wasn't a 3-player draft. It was like there were other players, but I'm just saying that top 3, one didn't work, right? Oh, it's Melo, it's LeBron, it's Darko. Well, no, it's not Darko, right? It's every time this happens, it almost never works out. Like, the last time I can really remember it working out was like, was it Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, 1, 2, 3, and that wasn't even built as the top 3. If you remember, like Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Jason Tatum, yeah, like it like one of these guys is gonna bust. Okay, that's not fair to say that one of these guys has to bust. That's like pretty big logical fallacy. I have a feeling that history has told us that one of these guys is not going to work out, and I'm pretty firm on who that one guy is. But look, man, he could turn into Rashard Lewis. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns into Rashard Lewis. He turns into more than Rashard Lewis. I am very shocked. And I don't think Rashard Lewis is worth Scoot Henderson. Like, no disrespect to Rashard Lewis, probably played in the wrong era. Really great player, really fun to watch, etc. But I think Scoot is like, as a franchise guy. Like, I think he's a franchise guy. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong on this. Maybe I'm not quite factoring in the dip this year. Maybe it's like more of a bad sign than I thought it was. Maybe the shot is more broken than I think it is. Maybe the athleticism won't hold up. Maybe he'll be injury prone. I have no idea. But he has every tool to be a very, 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 very successful guard in the NBA. Anyway, guys, I'm going to talk to you later. It's been cool. We did 2 lives. This one went a little bit longer than I was expecting. He could be like LaMelo. No. Who really wants to live in Portland? People who've been to Portland. Portland is awesome. Portland is a hellhole? What are you talking about? Have you been to Portland? Rank scrub. Expect better from you, man. No, it's a great place. I like Portland a lot. All right. Anyways, y'all. What's the plan for the draft live tomorrow? Great question, man. So I'm going to do a live with Leo Bias from Basketball Zone. We're going to live stream it. I've covered this draft a lot more than he has this year. So he's going to be more of this is the player that has been drafted. We'll have, images on the board, etc. And then I guess I'll be asked to cover what I feel about it. We'll go about 30 picks in. We won't talk about the second round as much. I don't want to be talking out of my ass. And to be honest, I just don't know a lot about the second round players in this draft because I didn't scout them. I stopped at around 35. That's as far as I went. I'm not a college basketball connoisseur. I'm not someone who watches college basketball in my spare time all the time. As you can imagine, I watched a lot of Raptors games. I have a life outside of this, so I didn't do it. And you know what? I'm very tempted to start doing it in years future because I'm realizing there's an opening here in the draft world for really in-depth analysis, really deep dives, into film study and shit. And I'm not seeing it serviced anywhere. And I'm seeing guys who are giving very superficial analysis, picking up 30, 40, 50, 60,000, subs. And I'm just bro, I think we can do better than this. And it's not completely throwing shade on people who do draft guides like the Ringer and the Athletic, etc. They have some stuff. I just think it can be better. I've always read websites like Draft Express and NBADraft.net, and I'm just it can get better. NBA Draft Room, it can get better. We can get deeper than this. We can get more granular than this. We can get down to what teams are looking for. You know what I mean? Okay, and then the more I'm thinking about it, I'm connecting more with people right now in the basketball world. I've been doing this for a year now. Some people in this world have been doing this for 10 years. I did it for a long time. Then I took this massive pause, lost a lot of contacts, lost a lot of networks, and now I'm kind of back into it. This is about a year and a half in, right? Year-ish. I didn't really start kicking into this channel until about June last year. So we're about a year into this, right? So now I'm starting to have conversations with people who are actually connected into the NBA world on a front office level, maybe someone who could actually get me into a position where I could, I don't know, do some scouting work for somebody. I would love to do that. This is basketball could be my life, and I could get paid for it. That'd be great. So I just want to try to do 1 year. I don't know if it's going to be next year's. I just hate next year's draft. Maybe it'll be the year after that, where I just want to go 1 year, actually spend some money, go and travel, go and start interviewing these players, go talk to these players. Maybe that could be a really interesting sidebar for this channel, where it's Pantera Basketball not only covers the Raptors, but it also does this incredibly granular job covering the draft each year. I think that would be awesome. I don't think the stats are awful at all. I just don't think that you're looking at them correctly, just being honest. Yeah, I think I'd be fine. He does have a little bit of glide to his game, eh? Yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot to everybody for tuning into both lives. Thanks a lot for paying attention to this draft board. I hope that it was interesting, original. Maybe you talked about players that you hadn't necessarily thought about at 13. I'm perfectly prepared to be wrong. When I thought back on that Paolo pick, I felt kind of oh man, maybe next year go a little bit less controversial. But every time I try to do that, I realize, or every time I think about doing that, I realize, no. You need to lean more into this. You need to be more like yourself. You need to be more bold. You need to be more controversial in the sense that you need to think for yourself at all costs. And that doesn't mean, and that means that if you think, if you think Dariq Whitehead is the second best player in this draft, then you need to put him over Scoot Henderson, and you just need to deal with people calling you crazy. Because if you're right and you say it, then that's great, max upside, because 90% of mock drafts are identical within 5% of each other. It's ooh, I'm so original. I moved the guy who's mocked up to 5 to number 6, right? But at some point, The guy who's 5 might be the 25th best player in the draft. And if you can see that right now, why not put him 25? You know what I mean? Why not be that bold person? You know, so I wanted to do that. It's not an ego thing. It's really more like a be true to yourself thing. It's also, in my opinion, I think that ideas like this can influence change. So I would love to see someone's original mock draft, like original, not based on this is what everyone else said, but really, I watched all 50 players, 60, 58 players that I think are going to get drafted, and this is how I'd really rank them. And I wouldn't be surprised if you put a guy who's currently in the 50s, in the 30s, and maybe a guy who's in the 40s in the teens. I wouldn't be surprised at all because we all see this different. We all see how these skills are going to translate different. It's next to impossible to grade these prospects properly based on looking at stats or by looking at game film because they played in different conferences, they played different roles, they played different, through different injuries throughout the year. They're different ages. It's so complicated. It's not as easy as, okay, every single person at 19 goes to the exact same league and plays the exact same role. Like you're all going to be lead initiators. I'm going to see who thrives and who fails. No, people are playing in different countries, different conferences, different situations, under different coaches, through different personal things. We are still dealing with the ramifications of COVID right now. All of these prospects, all of them had COVID disrupt 2 years of their basketball life. I don't know how that's affected one person versus another. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyways, yes, you will get one for sure. All right, guys, take care. Talk to you later. Peace out.